First of all, welcome, Dr. Cohen, to this is the official episode number 2 of my History Vibe podcast.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. It's really nice to be here. I appreciate your inviting me.
Absolutely glad to have you, and you can call me Carlton, not a problem.
And you can call me Michael, please.
Great, awesome. So you are the editor and project director of something called the Correspondence of Zachary Taylor and Millard Fillmore, which is this fascinating years long endeavor to comb through letters and correspondence that were written by Taylor and Fillmore or written to them from the 1840s to the 1850s, like a 10-year period in there. So give us an overview of what is the purpose of studying the letters of two very specific presidents.
Yeah, well, your description is very accurate. That is what we do. I'm a historian and what we call a documentary editor, which has nothing to do with documentary films. That's sort of a professional joke that I do not know Ken Burns. But our goal, what we do is we edit historical documents. We make documents, primary sources available and accessible so that people, students, teachers, and anyone who wants to learn about history can do so from the words of the people who lived through it. So many of these projects focus on particular individuals, like there are the papers of George Washington, the papers of Frederick Douglass, the papers of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, which was the first project I worked on. Or we take these papers, either everything that was written by a person, or in some cases their correspondence, everything, all the letters that they wrote and the letters they received, and type those up from the original handwritten manuscripts, publish them in print or online, and write notes explaining who all the people are, what the events are, the various topics they mentioned that were familiar then but aren't now. So then people can read them easily and understand them today and learn about the period. I think it's important that we include not just letters written by the person, but those written to them, because especially when you get to presidents and like the project that I work on, they receive letters from such a wide variety of individuals that it really expands what you do. Now, talking specific, or it really expands what topics you can cover. Like, as you said, specifically, I'm on the Correspondence of Zachary Taylor and Millard Fillmore. They are two of our lesser known presidents who together they served one term from 1849 to 53. Taylor died a little over a year into office, so Fillmore, his vice president, took over, which is why they do them together. And we're covering the 10 years leading up to and including their presidencies. And because they were important political figures, even if they're not so well known today, the letters that they wrote reveal a lot about what was going on in America, in politics and other topics of the time. But because they were such prominent individuals, they also received letters from a wide variety of Americans and some people from other countries, from politicians and diplomats to factory workers and Native Americans. Many presidents received letters from African Americans, both enslaved and free. We are still looking for letters specifically to Taylor and Fillmore from such people. We hope to find them. But the letters cover a wide variety of topics about the concerns of the people who wrote to them, as well as everyone's thoughts about the major issues going on in the country, two of the really big ones at the time, of which were the enslavement of African Americans and the potential expansion of slavery to new areas as the US acquired land, and the continued removal of Native Americans from the eastern United States as the government was trying to expel them to the lands west of the Mississippi River to clear up more land for white people and for the plantations where they forced Black people to labor. So we put these documents together so people can read them and learn about all these topics, not just about the men, Zachary Taylor and Millard Fillmore, but the society in which they lived and in which their correspondents lived.
It's so fascinating. And I guess I should offer a little bit of insight in that my fascination with this project is because I am a descendant of President Zachary Taylor. And as a Black American, it's a story that many of us have in terms of being related to having white ancestors. Um, I've known this since I was a child. I never really talked about it publicly. I started sharing it, a few years ago, probably when we first corresponded by email, when I found some of your research. Not because I have this sort of romantic idea of being related to a president. I never had that sense just because of the circumstances of slavery and how Black women were abused and raped and forced to deliver children under those circumstances. But because I want to know about my own people, the family members, the ancestors who were enslaved, and all we know is Annie, right? We just have a name, an enslaved woman named Annie and Zachary Taylor. That's what I've been told. Beyond that, I don't have any information. So the letters are very interesting to me because they might provide some insight as to who Annie was. I'm fortunate that you provided me with a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the contents of a sample Zachary Taylor letter from the time. So first, let's talk about just how difficult it is to translate these letters, because you're talking about handwriting, style of English, and names and locations and obscure references all balled up into one big puzzle.
Yes, and sometimes it seems like, oh, we're just taking these documents and making them available. It's already there. We just put it up online or put it into a book. Yeah, as you say, it is much more complicated than that, in part because these people did write in a cursive particular to the 19th century, and in fact, in many different cursive styles. Often, when referring to an enslaved person, like Taylor will write just Mary, or he'll refer to Matilda or Charles or Will. And if you look at other records, such as purchase records and wills and estate records, you'll find that he in fact enslaved multiple people by this name.
Mhm.
So we have to look at multiple letters and other documents to try to figure out which of these people he's referring to in this particular letter, so that we can write notes explaining that to our readers. As the original recipients of these letters, they knew the topics, they understood what was going on, so they could just read them, and that's that. People today, they don't know who Mary was. They don't know who even the major politicians of the 19th century were, for the most part. We know who Lincoln is, but do most people know William Henry Seward, or for that matter, Millard Fillmore?
In the letters that you showed me that you're still working on, first of all, thank you. That was incredibly insightful and just putting yourself in the times.
Thank you.
And we could talk about this for hours. So I'm trying to keep my questions focused. But in terms of Zachary Taylor, you saw him referencing a particular name, and you later learned that that was an enslaved person, but you didn't know that initially. Talk about that sort of process for you.
He owned plantations at various times in Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and later in his life, at any particular time, he would enslave well over 100 people on these places. Um, and so, yeah, especially in letters to his daughter, where, as you said, there'll be the mix of him referring to these white relatives and occasionally referring to an enslaved person. It's not always clear. Like, he'll refer to when he talks about enslaved people, it's sometimes it is very clear. Like when he's writing to his overseer, he says, "Make sure that the good axemen chop down this many trees so that we can sell them and I can make some money on it. Make sure that you have enough people or servants, as he called them, to grow cotton at a specific time, so we have an adequate crop." But other times he'll express concern about a person's health, for example. Let's say that I heard Will or I heard Charles was ill, and I was very sorry to hear that. And I hope you will have a doctor come and to take care of him, because it's very important that he recovers his health. And it sounds like he's referring to a friend or a white family member, but we also have to remember, even in times when it's clear he's talking about enslaved people, he does express concern for their health. He wants his overseer to make sure they're in good health. And I mean, you can say that that could be genuine concern. You can also remember that he has an economic interest in maintaining the health of the people he claims ownership over, because they are growing the cotton and other crops that he makes money on. As far as the question of whether these were sort of good enslavers, people who genuinely cared about the people they enslaved. When I speak with historians, generally no, I mean, professional historians understand that these were economic concerns, and these people, even if they sometimes described enslaved people as parts of their family or as servants, then they did not see them as human beings on the same level as white people. When I talk to students, it's generally the same, but sometimes students are surprised at how central owning human beings and forcing them to labor was to the identity of a person like Zachary Taylor, because they might think of him as he's this great general. He was a very successful general, that's true, and he was president and accomplished these things as president. But then some of the people who spent the most time with him over the course of his life were these people he claimed to own as chattel property. And that sometimes becomes a real shock for students. As far as conversations beyond those historian and student communities, and I have occasionally had conversations with people who were, I mean, you were talking about your ancestry, whose ancestors were enslavers. And they will say that their ancestors were, in fact, good slaveholders who considered these people to be family and treated them well. And I mean, when I encounter these, it's a bit of a shock for me, since I mean, I look at things so differently. So they're important conversations to have with people who continue to look on enslavement as potentially a familial and sort of convivial relationship. That's why documents like these letters and like other documents that projects are unearthing, written in some cases by enslaved people themselves, it's why they're so important to bring into a larger public sphere, so that people understand what this life really was like. Whether a person was enslaved by, say, Taylor's predecessor, James K. Polk, also a Mississippi slaveholder, who would write to his overseer to like beat him well, is in one of his letters referring to an enslaved man who had attempted to escape. Whether they were enslaved by Polk or by Taylor, who would write, "I'm so sorry about his health, and I hope, and please get a doctor." They were forced to labor. They had no say in this matter. They had not chosen, okay, I'm going to work for Taylor because he's a nice guy. No, their lives in so many ways were dictated to them. Taylor actually even wrote in his will of certain enslaved people that they would be slaves for life. And even after he was dead, he wanted to make sure that they never attained freedom.
Wow.
And I guess that kind of brings me back to the people I was mentioning, Charles and Will. And once we remember that, yeah, he often expresses medical concern about enslaved people generally. Well, maybe when he's expressing this concern about Charles and Will, that these are enslaved people. So then we look at other letters, we look at his estate records, we look at the purchase records when he purchased his largest plantation. The deed also listed all of the people, the 60 some odd people who were purchased along with that. And we find, yes, there were people by these names. And as we do a little more digging, we find out, yeah, Charles, that's in fact Charles Porter, an enslaved Black man who was given as a gift to Zachary by his parents as what they called a body slave, or a body servant, rather, they would say. which meant an enslaved person who was kind of his personal servant to do whatever he needed as he traveled around. He brought Charles to lots of military posts and to Mexico when he was fighting there, and then to the White House. And Charles Porter died when he was living in the White House. And William Webb turned out to be the Will he referred to. This is a man who Zachary Taylor also brought to a number of military posts. He would list them on military records because the federal government would actually reimburse officers for the cost of maintaining servants or enslaved people. So in effect, Taylor got paid extra because he owned these human beings. William Webb was the daughter of Jane, a woman whom Taylor enslaved, and he ended up continuing to serve Taylor at various locations until the presidency, at which point he disappears from the record. Well, it turns out that there may be even more to the story. According to the genealogy research done by a family in Canada, he may have been a man who emerges in Ontario named William Taylor in the 1870s, who seems likely to have been a son of Zachary Taylor. It appears that Zachary raped this woman, Jane, whom he enslaved, had a son named Will, and when he was president, apparently, we're still looking for more documentation on this, sent him to rural Canada, perhaps to prevent any bad press coming from this discovery that he had an enslaved Black son, one of several enslaved children he had, including your ancestor, which many white people in the United States would have thought was fine. Many others would have thought, even if they supported the existence of slavery, that looked really bad for a president of the United States.
Wow. So do you think I'm ever going to find Annie? I mean, I'm excited to know that you're getting hundreds of letters that you're combing through. It's going to take you months and years to get through them all. But I just want to know, are you going to find Annie?
Well, if we do, you will be the first to know, I assure you. And we found hints, like in that purchase record, that deed from when he bought Cypress Grove Plantation in Mississippi. There are two enslaved people listed there named Anne. Like one is just listed as Anne, and the other as Big Anne. We have not yet found out more about them. Most of the people who are listed in these generic records, deeds or wills, we have not found more information about, because he usually just lists the enslaved people as the servants or the people in his letters without getting down to specifics. So I cannot give you a high probability that we will encounter Annie, but it is possible. And especially if we find the letters that were written to Taylor by his overseer, then we'd have a much better chance, because we have one side of this conversation, the ones that Taylor wrote to the overseer, Ringgold. But Thomas Ringgold, he was the one actually on the plantation. Taylor was off in his army assignments. So he'd have much more contact and much more knowledge of the individual enslaved people there. And it's entirely possible that he would name more of them. When I worked on James Polk's letters, the letters from his overseer, which we did have, were one of the best places to find information about specific enslaved people. So if those show up somewhere, then we have a good chance. One of the challenges of working with Taylor's letters is that his home in Kentucky was ransacked by Union soldiers during the Civil War. So a lot of the incoming letters, the letters he received, have disappeared. Many have shown up, and some were not destroyed. At least one soldier kind of kept a few of these letters, thinking, "Oh, these are a president's letters. These are a treasure. I want to keep these." And in many cases, ended up in libraries later. So as more things show up, as we go through more letters, it is possible, but I can't promise anything, unfortunately.
We are almost at the end, so I just want to give you a chance to tell folks sort of call to action if they're interested in this era and these presidents and these correspondents. Are they available now? Should they wait? What should they do?
Well, some are available now. For the most part, we haven't begun publishing the letters. We're publishing them in 3 volumes. We expect in about a year to be sending volume 1 off to the press. So probably around 2026, it'll be published, these pre-presidential letters in print and online. For now, a few of them have been published on our website, taylorandfillmore.org. As I said, as part of a teaching guide, and occasionally I'll include sections from letters in the blog that we have on that site. So I encourage people to go there. Also, if you are on X, to follow us at ZT and MF. You can also contact us. There's a contact form on our website. If you have a Taylor or a Fillmore letter, then by all means, let us know. We would love to have a copy of it or to learn about it and to share any information we have about it and surrounding it with you. And feel free to contact us with any questions. Also, I encourage people to go to another website, documentaryediting.org. This is the website of the Association for Documentary Editing, which is an organization of projects like ours. And it is, in my opinion, the best way to study history, to read the words of the people who lived through it. So I urge people to do that.
Michael Cohen, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for your research. Good luck with the research. And I hope that many more families are able to take advantage of this type of research and perhaps learn more about their ancestors. So thank you for being on our show.
Thank you very much, Carlton, for having me. And I share all those same hopes as well.